Welcome to the Scott Mann Podcast, where we connect like our lives depend on it. What's up, teammates? Welcome to the Scott Mann Podcast. We've got a solo edition. I like to drop these in every now and then and just talk to you. And I felt like this is a good time to do it because we've been on the road for a while. Monty and I have, my bride. And, I've seen some things in the last couple of weeks in terms of human connection. And of course, that's the through line for this podcast is human connection. And a big part of human connection is rapport. Dr. Ivan Tyrrell talks about that in the Human Givens as the rapport is one of those innate drivers that's within all of us. It's something that drives us to be more connected. Social connection is our superpower. It's what we're wired to do. We don't have fur, fangs, or claws, but yet we sit on top of the food chain. Why is that? Because we form teams. We connect better than any other mammals on the planet. And, I talk about this a lot in my book, Nobody's Coming to Save You, and how important human connection is in all aspects of leadership, influence, getting big shit done. I really learned that. I learned it from my old man and my mom, as many of you did, but also it was reinforced for me big time in Special Forces because what I call the Lawrenceian skills, like T.E. Lawrence in 1917 with the Arab tribes. You've got to build rapport to move people, reluctant people to action. And that's kind of at the heart of what Green Berets do. They drop into places that are low trust, high stakes, and they have to build relationships. They have to build rapport very quickly. And so I learned at an early age as an SF officer the importance of rapport. But it wasn't until I went back after I got out of the military and did some teaching at Fort Bragg with Green Beret candidates, captains that were going through the course, specifically on rapport building, that I really started to get the kind of, I think, science appreciation for what we're talking about here. In other words, what I mean is, even in the Special Forces community, we have since 1952, as long as SF's been around, there's always been this emphasis on rapport, building rapport and maintaining rapport. And if you lose it, whether that's in training or in real world loss of rapport downrange at an embassy or whatever, you're gone. Like that is the fastest way to get yourself booted from the SF community. Why? Because everything you do is built on rapport. Even the kinetic work you do, for the most part, we can do some unilateral stuff too, but primarily we're a combat multiplier and a strategic asset because of the relationships that we can leverage in high stakes moments. And so rapport is a big deal. But what I found was, as I was brought in to do some teaching on that, there wasn't a lot on really how to build rapport. It was kind of that squishy thing that you kind of had it or you didn't. And I knew that because I looked everywhere for a definition of rapport and didn't really see one. And so I introduced one, at least in my curriculum, and there may have already been one out there that I missed, but I would ask the guys to get out their phones, and this was, I think, when you could have them in there. I can't remember. Maybe they weren't supposed to. But I would ask them to look up the definition of rapport. So I want you to do that with me, if you don't mind. Just get your phone out and let's look up the definition of rapport together. Just type it into your browser, RAPPORT, and let's see what pops up. What'd you get? I bet you got a close and harmonious relationship in which the people or groups concerned understand each other's feelings or ideas and communicate well. The looks on a lot of the faces of the young operators to be that I'm training are like, what? That is a pretty specific definition. A close and harmonious relationship in which the people or groups concerned understand each other's feelings or ideas and communicate well. Why? Because we're social creatures. We're wired to be social. This is why the whole human operating system, the through line of connection, is so damn important, particularly below the waterline of our human nature. We've lost that skill. It's atrophied, but we have to understand we haven't lost it. It's just buried. It's innate within us, this aspect of human connection. And rapport, that definition of rapport, that close and harmonious connection, where we communicate well, we understand each other's ideas and feelings, that's not an easy thing to do. It's not just something that just happens. We have to work at rapport, particularly in this time of churn that we live in. And so I'm always talking about this, and what I found is that in this time of churn, there is a lesser appreciation for rapport than at any time that I've ever been doing this in the several decades that I've been teaching leadership. I feel like the art and science, the craft of rapport building and rapport maintaining is really low. Some people are instinctively good at it, but you can't train instinct. Institutionally, it's lacking. I see it lacking in relationship managers who are not really relationship managers. They couldn't even give you the definition of a relationship. And I've spent a lot of years just studying, the mechanics of social capital. So I thought on this podcast, I would introduce maybe this topic, and it is 3 ways to kill rapport in the time of churn that we're in. 3 ways to kill rapport. And let me just set the context of this. Monty and I have been on the road, as I told you earlier, really since April 29th. We're on the road or just sticking and moving really hard with our human connection, public speaking, storytelling, nonprofit work from like 29 April to 9 May, about an 11-day stretch. I've taught at a Capital One workshop. I've done a live keynote in Minnesota right before the play Last Out. I've done a 1-person play reading for my upcoming play, Operation Pineapple Express, to an open room. I've done a webinar to about 25, 30 folks who are solopreneurs. And I've done a Zoom keynote to bankers all over the country. I've run a 2-day workshop here that we just finished up, an intensive 2-day storytelling workshop on repurposing struggle. I've done 2 podcasts today. I was pulled over by law enforcement a couple of days ago before expired tags or suspended license. Actually, they ran my plate while they were driving behind me. That'll be a fun story in a second. And 2 trips to the DMV as a result of that. And I officiated a wedding. So those, like over the last 11 days, what I'm about to talk to you about kind of comes from all that area because, while that's been kind of crazy, I bet you can locate yourself in some of those things that have happened. And I want to just bring up the point that some of it is human engagement on the stage, right? Some of it is, on the for-profit side, transactional, but some of it is living life. And in all of that, I believe that leadership and rapport is a constant. You don't have rapport at work versus rapport at home. It's how we navigate the world. And man, I've seen a lot of diverse behavior, human behavior in real time over these last 11 days. And I've seen rapport lost many times, but I've also seen rapport built and maintained a few times that I want to call out as kind of the antithesis of this topic. So let's just get into it. Let's just talk about, and this is not going to be a terribly long episode, but I think it is important that sometimes we just pull up and we talk with each other. If the through line is human connection, then let's actually have a conversation about it. And I'm just going to give you some real world observations. These are my opinions, mostly. I'll try to weave in some content, or not content, but just like, information that is helpful to make sense of the content that I'm putting out in the context. So let's start with, what is the cost? We know what the definition of rapport is. Let me read it one more time. I will, because I like to read it. Rapport is a close and harmonious relationship in which the people or groups concerned understand each other's feelings or ideas and communicate well. Boy, feels like some woo-woo shit, doesn't it? But it's not really. It's not. It's our superpower. It's actually what we're supposed to do. It's what we've been doing for hundreds of thousands of years, but it makes us squirm. Why? Why does it make us squirm? Why does it make some of us feel uncomfortable? Because we do live in a time of churn. We live in a time of transaction-dominated arena. We live in an attention-based economy. We live in high distraction, high disengagement, high distrust. And when all those factors are in play and you have the VUCA environment of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, crowdedness, and ambiguity, and the internal resistance that goes with that, the self-sabotage that manifests as a result of that human operating system under tension, you start to pull back from things like close and harmonious relationships because we're in fight, flight, or freeze mode. We're in a trance state. So, and plus we have divisionist leaders on both sides of the aisle telling us that these people over here are evil people. And if you don't believe this is you are going to hell and you're a bad person. You're not American. That's contagious. That is contagious. And I've seen it take down entire societies. So rapport is the social capital that we need more than ever with one another. We need rapport with our neighbors. We need rapport with our families, rapport with our clients, rapport with our employees. And what's the cost if you lose it? Well, you lose connection, but you also lose your potential for influence, I believe. I think you lose your agency as a human. If you lose rapport, there's a cost to losing rapport. There's a cost to not building rapport also. It's not as bad, if you gain rapport and then you lose it, that puts you in a deficit, doesn't it? A lot of people are doing that these days. But there's also just a cost of there's an opportunity cost of not building rapport when you go just transactional. Why? Because we're not wired that way, man. Like, that's not our operating system. It's not our primal tendency. Our primal tendency is to form connections and to connect and to understand one another and to build social capital. It's not easy and it's not always possible, but it's our baseline. Yet we've moved away from it. It's below the waterline. It's invisible. So I reflected on 3 ways that I've seen consistently in the last 11 days to quickly kill rapport. And I just want to lay them out there. And again, see if you can locate yourself in this, right? If the shoe fits, wear it. It's also cautionary. Doesn't mean you're doing it right now. But again, I'm basing this off these recent experiences because these were just the first 3 things that came to mind. I think when Colin and I started, I think I said 10, and that wouldn't be hard either. I'm doing this really just to keep you in mind for the time length here. But let's start with number 1, right? Number one way to kill rapport in this time of churn is PowerPoint. My God, can we lay off the PowerPoint? It is atrocious. This is coming from a guy who, learned PowerPoint in the military. I did a lot of time on staff. I get it. I understand. I've been guilty of it. At times, maybe I still am. But damn, what the actual hell are we doing with that application, man? It has gotten so bad. I've seen it on the road, again, like I'm telling you, from different viewpoints in corporate America, but also small businesses. Speakers we're overusing it. It was never, I don't think PowerPoint was ever designed this way. We are storytellers. Humans are natural storytellers. We want to put our attention in one place. We are not capable of multitasking. And if you build these big ass complex PowerPoint decks, we need to understand that the focus and the energy is going to be on that deck, on that slideshow. Why is that important? Because humans are mostly energy, and leadership is the management of energy, yours and those around you. So if you're directing people's energy onto a slide deck the whole time, they're not looking at you. They're not processing true information the way the metaphor pattern matching brain is designed to do it. In fact, David Phillips in Death by PowerPoint, a study that he did, he's found they actually measured brain activity during PowerPoint presentations, and they found that your audience forgets 90% of your content 30 seconds after you say thank you for your time. You know what I mean? It's not good. Why? Because you're engaging working memory. PowerPoint engages working memory. It doesn't engage long-term memory like storytelling does. That's why you remember stories with intimate detail and color that your grandparents and parents told you and other influential people in your life. You remember them years after maybe they're even gone because storytelling engages long-term memory. Storytelling provides meaning. Storytelling provides context, which God knows we don't have any of today. We don't have any context in what's going on. And in the Human Givens, you hear Tyrrell talk all the time in Givens about how context is everything. Diplomat John Bell talks about we have no context when we're trying to negotiate and solve problems. There's no context. And without context, you can't do shit. I wrote in Game Changers about village stability operations. You either go local or go home. All of that's to say that PowerPoint doesn't provide any of that, but it certainly engages working memory, which means people are going to forget it. They're going to forget it. And yet a lot of you, I bet you right now, you probably laughed when I said that about they forget 90% of your stuff in 30 seconds. But then I bet a lot of you also, either within a very short period of time, will be sitting down building a PowerPoint deck again. I don't know why we do that, but we do. We are so intrinsically entangled into our reliance on power. I'm seeing this reading of the slides. Most recently, I saw a wonderful little company honoring their employees, doing all the right things to honor them, but they were reading from these slides that were behind them. And I talked to the owner about it. He knows, and I'm not going to talk about who it is because everybody does this. But it is a lesson learned, is if you're going to bring people up and recognize them, you don't turn and read the slide, because even the person getting the award was turning and reading the slide. So what do we want to do? We want to internalize those things. Use PowerPoint as a tool. You could have the picture of that person or maybe the small bullets, and then speak. But the agency and the focus, the energy should be on the speaker, never the slide. And if you're going to give energy to the slide, take it back. So again, the big thing that's happening there is you're surrendering your focus, you're surrendering your agency as a communicator, as a leader, if you give it up to PowerPoint. And we're doing it more and more. So, okay, so what can you do about it? Well, there's a few things. I'm not telling you got to get rid of PowerPoint. I'm not deluded. And I recognize that some people have. I mean, I pretty much have. I still use it as a platform, but I put pictures on it. Or I'll put my iceberg, but it's super big picture stuff. And I never give power to the slide. I'm telling stories the whole time. But I mean, I can fall into that trap too. So my point here is, I understand that you may not be able to get rid of PowerPoint, but you can certainly introduce what I call narrative competence, which is the use of purposeful storytelling in real time to meet your goals and the goals of the other party. So could you, for example, put your whole presentation in story format? How about that? And we've got lots of stuff out there and you can find lots of stuff out there on the hero's journey. What makes a story format? It's really pretty simple. It's really a character who's trying to achieve a goal, who faces obstacles and eventually overcomes those obstacles and reaches resolution or the home shore, so to speak. They overcome those goals and they either learn or change or something like that. There's a resolution and ending. Think about that. You could build a PowerPoint deck like that. You really could, where you start with, the problem presenting itself, and then, the challenges that you went through and the struggle, and then what did you learn? How did you change? Or what was the resolution on the other side of that? What's the outcome? Think about that. And if you work at that, it's not that difficult to do. So that's one thing. The other thing you can do is what I call narrative wrapping, or data wrapping. Really, it's where if you have left brain information, you need to remember that the listener is going to tell themselves a story, even if you present them PowerPoint or data. So what's going to happen is they're going to turn into, kind of an insurgent against you. I'll talk more about that in the next one. But they're going to tell themselves a story about the data you're presenting on your slides, and several things are going to happen. They're going to get it wrong. They've measured this, in fact, and they're going to be slightly agitated, if not, moderately agitated, that the brain had to work during that presentation to tell itself a story. Now think about times that this has happened with you, right? When you've sat down and you see a slide deck and it's like 60 slides, you're like, oh my God, you're already in an agitated state. Or if you've been presented with overwhelming data and you're just like, your brain's just saturated. The brain's trying to tell itself a story to make sense of that data. So if you put your stuff in a story, your data, whatever it is, then it will likely pass through the listener's brain with no interruptions. And they're ready to listen to what you have to say, and they're open to that data. So, could you put a story on the front end of your presentation that was then followed by data and then concluded with the end of the story, or another vignette, or I'll leave you with this kind of thing? You see what I mean? So you're speaking to both the heart and the head, and it's a very doable thing to do. And then the final thing is to remember that, or another suggestion is just put pictures on the slides. A lot of times I know we feel like we're kind of lost in the presentation, but just a picture and a single heading, a bullet, that is a theme as you move through that. You could even do that in the format of a story. Again, a character who has a goal, who faces a challenge, trying to reach that goal, overcomes that goal for resolution. Could you do pictures like that? It works. Telling you. And the more you have those pictures, then that becomes somewhat congruent with the storytelling that you're doing. The picture can just come up. You can give it a look. Okay, that picture there, let me tell you about that. And when you say that, all focus comes back on you. And they might cut their eyes over to it, look at, or you can even drop it at that point. Is this a little bit more work? Yeah, but what I'm telling you is you're addressing the story sensors of the brain, and the brain knows it's being communicated to in a primal way, and people lean forward and they get ready to listen, right? And so now your influence competitive edge is through the roof. So take that for what it's worth. But the fastest way to kill rapport is to press the gas on the PowerPoint, because you're crushing people, man. Number two is the fastest way to kill rapport in my mind in this time of churn is to go straight to the transaction. Doesn't matter what the transaction is, whether the transaction is selling something online or asking for a donation, or dare I say it, Colin, giving a traffic ticket, right? There's different ways all those are transactional things, but I've found that if you go straight to the transaction, a lot of people are doing that. Because we are social creatures in this time of churn, you actually, I think you run the risk of putting that person into a trance state where they physiologically can't hear you, because in this time of churn, everyone is emotionally elevated anyway. And so it's unprecedented in the last few years. People are in these elevated states of fight, flight, or freeze, or the human operating system under tension for a range of things. And so they're one step away from, being in a sympathetic state. And when you go into a sympathetic state of fight, flight, or freeze, I don't care how good your shit is, no one can hear you, right? It's just like, if you think about when you've been in an argument with your spouse, right? And it gets heated. I know that would never happen. Maybe it's just me. But let's say it did. And it gets heated. Does the other person go, oh, you know what? That logic makes so much sense. We should definitely do that. Like said, no one ever. So the reality is we click up until the ears just stop working, and you physiologically can't hear them and they can't hear you. And so in going straight to the transactions, what I say is, what Stuart Diamond says, and getting more, which is get the other party ready to listen. I want to get them ready to listen to what I have to say. And if you go straight to the transaction, if you're doing that in sales, if you're doing that in customer service, or if you're even talking to your teenager, if you're trying to get your teenager to come home early from curfew or on time for curfew, that's a transaction. Yeah. I mean, any of these things where, you are getting something from the other party, that is a transaction. And there's nothing wrong with transactions, but when we lead with a transactional mindset in a world that is inundated with that, we are simply putting ourselves at risk, and you're basically erasing all of your agency for influence in that moment. So if you're cool with that and you want to be casual about it, that's fine. But just know that you're going to leave about 85% social capital on the table, the tangible and intangible linkages that actually count for something. Why? Because the return on investment in social capital, the tangible and intangible linkages between humans, is reciprocity, right? Rapport, I believe, ultimately leads to reciprocity, because the relationship is the asset. And reciprocity is that need that we feel to do something for the other party when we feel a deep connection to them, when we feel heard and seen. And that's not woo-woo bullshit, man. Like that is straight up, that is a biological reality of who we are as humans. And if you look at most of what, like Green Berets, for example, are able to do in trust-depleted places, it's out of reciprocity. They're outnumbered 100-1 in most of these places, yet you see villagers going up on rooftops fighting alongside them, or weeping when they get on helicopters to go home. Why? Because of the reciprocal relationship that's been built, starting with rapport. So when you just go straight to the transaction, you're basically saying, I don't really give a shit about rapport. I don't really give a shit about social capital. Let's get this done. That has a life cycle and a lifespan to it. And you will hit a glass ceiling. And at some point, someone is going to roll a grenade in the room with you, physical or, virtual. But you live and die by the transactional mindset. And I see it all the time. I've seen it particularly in the online sales community, a lot of the multi-level marketing stuff that's going on, ads. People are so transactional. But the reality is that's going to catch up with you. It's going to catch up with you. You might make a shit ton of money, but there's, as Robert Putnam says in Bowling Alone, there's zero correlation to money and happiness in just about every study ever done. But there's over 50 years of data that shows a direct correlation to it, that one's happiness is tied to the depth and breadth of one's social capital, of one's social relationships. So again, I'm just stomping the foot here. Like if you go straight to the transaction every time, then you're taking your agency for influence away. You're just like literally cutting out your own legs, particularly in a time of churn where social capital, the oldest form of capital in the world, is everything, right? And to give you an idea of just how powerful this still is, when I say humans are wired for social connections, Matthew Lieberman in the book Social tells us that the human brain's preferred state of rest is thinking about other humans. Think about that for a second. And I want you to see if you notice that in those quiet moments when you're kind of at rest, what are you actually doing? You're probably, unless you're doing deep meditation, just the preferred default state of rest, you're probably thinking about other humans. You're thinking about what happened at work or what might be happening at work with your boss or what you should have said to your mother-in-law. God, we should. Those are real things. And so this notion of social connection, social capital is so pervasive that our brain's preferred state of rest is thinking about other humans. So if you're casual about rapport and you go straight to the transactions, then just think about what you're leaving on the table. I mean, yes, it's harder. It is a time of churn, but it is critical. And the thing is, if you establish make a human so what is it that I say is make a human connection first. Again, quoting Diamond there, make a human connection first. Yes, you've got transactions, we all do, but make a human connection first, because if you don't, not only are you going to, probably be a bit off-putting to the person across from you, you could actually just turn them into an insurgent that's trying to, tube your goals. Because there are so many transactionally minded people and we're just inundated with transactions that our spidey senses are hyper acute to it, aren't we? We know, right? We know when we're being sold. We know when we're being pitched, and especially someone who just goes right to the pitch. That's why, the second you see something like in your email, you delete it. You typically don't give them a chance because it's a transactional move. So we're hyper acute to it in this time of hyper churn. Just the other day, I got pulled over coming back from an event it was kind of a soft week event, but not really. Monty and I were driving home. We live, out in the eastern part or east side of Tampa, and blue lights in the rearview mirror. And so I pull over, and I'm not gonna out the law enforcement agency yet. I am gonna file a complaint against this dude, and then we'll see what happens. But he comes up to the window and immediately just goes into like, not just transaction, but like an accusatory type thing. Being respectful, ID card comes out, all that, driver's license. And it just went south from there. I mean, and ended up being an issue with insurance that my insurance company had actually made a mistake on. But in the course of the conversation, I've always had massive respect for law enforcement, first responders. I think that's been evident in my work. This dude was just, I felt like I was in another country where when you get stopped by law enforcement, your spidey senses are up. You're concerned for your safety. That's what it felt like. This dude was so transactional, even maybe beyond that, maybe bordering on unprofessional. But the point here is that, he took a guy like me who's super, super, super supportive of our law enforcement. And, every other encounter I've had with law enforcement in this area has been phenomenal. It just erased that in a second. And I think honestly, by his attitude, put his whole organization at risk, because that kind of organizational rapport loss, man, if that's how that dude does traffic stops on average, and that's how he treats like a career special operations officer who retired in this area, and it's clear through conversation that that's what's going on, and that we're just looking for answers on how do we handle this, how do we figure out how to fix it. It was none of that. It was straight up transactions, accusatory, and it changed my point of view. I've had to work through that, but that's the kind of stuff that can happen. And I've been guilty of it too. I've been guilty of doing the same thing when I go down range or when I'm doing business development. Maybe not, hopefully not, that level of unprofessionalism, but right to the transaction and just casual about the connection. We can't do that. Anytime that we do that, we're putting the whole thing at risk. So, you know, so what's my take on that with you? There's a couple of things is just really focus on making a human connection first. We just want to do that. It's so important. And I think putting the relationship before the transaction. Think about the relationship more than anything else, because that is the most important thing in the whole engagement, is that rapport and that relationship. Is put it first, put it before the transaction, and then the transactions will just flow off that. That's the way it's always been throughout history anyway. Transactions are a byproduct of rapport and social capital. The third one is the danger. If you want to lose rapport quick, just leave people to form their own conclusions when things are complex and ambiguous and challenging, or during times of change. Just leave people to figure it out for themselves. Don't tell them what's going on. That is a really quick way to lose rapport with your clients, your employees, the people you serve in the community. Because here's what happens when we face change as humans. You know, our brain is a metaphorical pattern matching organ, so it tells itself a story to make sense of things. The brain has a make sense mandate, as Dr. Kendall Haven says. So it's constantly trying to make sense of things. And so since story is a sense-making tool, the brain will tell itself a story. So in the absence of information about what's going on, the individual will go back to neural story maps from past things where likely pain was caused by a similar pattern, because it's matching patterns, and it will start telling itself a story. So if you get up on stage and you roll out this beautiful 70-slide deck on why this merger is going to be the most awesome of awesome, and you get off the stage, you're like, yeah, nailed that shit. And your audience is sitting out there, your employees, like with their jaws on the ground. Why? Because they didn't hear any of it. The second they heard merger and all that left brain data up there that's on the slide about the economics of the merger and the organizational change that will follow and how good it is for the company, their brain goes to scarcity, right? The two primal moves every time in a situation like this. Will I have enough? And is my status within my tribe going to change? And so what do? They start telling themselves a story about another merger, the last merger in their past, where they got their ass kicked. So while you're up thinking your left brain PowerPoint deck is awesome, they're out there in their right brain world thinking this is going to go down just like the last shitty merger I was part of. So what's happened is you've actually created social insurgents to your merger. And what are they going to do? They're going to withdraw back into their in-groups, and they are going to become literal insurgents to the joining of these 2 or 3 cultures or whatever it is. They're going to join up with the people they feel safest with, that look like them, that think like them, that believe like them, and they will circle wagons against any level of change, and they will bleed you dry, not maliciously, but out of pure survival, one cut at a time. And this is the danger of leaving people just to their own devices when times of change, and not shaping the narrative, not shaping the story. I'll give you another example. I think the change in administration that's happened with this new administration, with the Trump administration, I think there was an opportunity with veterans from Global War on Terror who were participatory in the withdrawal of our allies to try to help our Afghan allies get out. And many of us have felt like and it's a non-political thing, at least it is for me, that the last administration did not have our allies at the top of their concern, that they didn't have the impacts of counterterrorism at the top of their concern. And there was a degree of, okay, well, there's a new administration coming in, we'll be able to address things like the P1 visas or the P1 asylum status and the SIVs and all of these things that had been a real challenge for the last. And all these changes came in on immigration and things like that. And while I understand the policy logic of it, the transactional logic, no one ever spoke to the veterans. No one communicated to all of those thousands of veterans who frankly jumped into the fray when the institutions failed in the withdrawal and have been holding the line ever since in a range of ways, trying to solve Uncle Sam-sized problems with their retirement pensions, as my buddy Duke says, right? No one engaged those veterans. No one communicated to them. No one has said really anything to them that I've seen top down. Now, there have been some efforts bottom up for some of us to go to D.C. and communicate, and to the credit of this administration, from what I've seen, some have listened to us, but a huge missed opportunity just in terms of communication. Just take that for what it's worth. I think there could be much more dialogue with our GWAT veteran population, and you could actually mobilize them to be problem solvers in this. Instead, they feel not communicated with, not seen, not heard. And so what? All of the past stories of what happened 4 years ago are coming back up. And you're going to see increases in mental health issues, moral injury, and other terrible things, right? But I've also seen a positive example of this. When all of that happened, getting pulled over, we had to go to the Department of Motor Vehicles here in Hillsborough County, and I've had to do some posts. Or I haven't had to. I've done some posts on this because Monty and I went to this to the DMV. You've been to the DMV, right? I mean, it's when you got to get your. In this case, we had the guy pulled our tag off our car and left it. We had to basically leave the car on the side of the road, got towed. But we had to go get a license plate and a new driver's license. And that's not a fun experience, either one of them. Doing them both anywhere that I've ever been, that is just a nightmare. Plus, we had all this other stuff going on that I read you. So we're having to figure out how to make that happen. So we get up at just the butt crack of dawn, go to the DMV. We brought chairs to sit out in the line because I figured that's how long we were going to be out there. And lo and behold, 30 minutes before the doors are supposed to open, this lady comes out, makes an announcement. They get us in line. They move us inside. They put us in 8 different lines. You get checked in. They'd give you a text number. You sit down. You've got these concierge people coming over with iPads asking you what you're there for real politely. And then we tell them, and they're like, okay, let me make sure you got the right paperwork here. And we go through it. It was incredible. And I'm watching this. I'm like, I cannot believe this. We got seen, I'm not kidding you, 5 minutes after the 8 o'clock open. And I mean, right before that, I'd looked outside. There's no line. There's no line outside. I mean, a complete transformation in the Department of Motor Vehicles. And this place sees 1,000 people a day. So I told this lady right before we were getting to go up, I'm like, this is really impressive. What the hell have y'all done? And she goes, oh, well, that's our tax assessor right there. Can you tell her? So I went up to her and, I told her, I said, I don't know what you're doing here. I want to give you her name because this is just leadership in action, man. It's so impressive. But yeah, here it is. Nancy C. Milan. She saw the problem. She got down on and let her people know. She talked to people and she saw where the bottleneck was. The bottleneck was the line outside, and then waiting all that time in the waiting room, nobody talking to you. You kind of feel like you're just a number. You are. And then once you get called back, the service is pretty good. But that period there, people are so agitated at that point, that churn, that by the time they get back, they're having all kinds of problems. There's all kinds of morale issues. The DMV is getting a horrible reputation. So she went in and she was present on the ground. So when the other thing was when they met their time to get everybody in, they gave themselves a big round of applause, and people in the DMV clapped too. I mean, it was like, I've been around a lot of bureaucratic processes. I know you have too. It was purely transformational, right? And she was on the ground. She never got in the way. She was just helping. And you could tell she was there for the standard. She was watching, but it was really impressive. She was right there present. Number 2, she insisted on over communication. And this is a big one, you guys. This is what I was talking about. If you leave people to their own devices, their false narratives are going to form in their head based on past neural story maps. So what do you want to do? You want to over communicate. And that's what and she told me, she said, that's what these concierges are. Is that right word, concierges? Or is that Arkansas? Okay. That's what these helpers were doing, was they were going around talking to folks. And it was so impressive because they were over communicating. They were helping us really understand what was going on. And so we weren't wondering if we were a number. We weren't wondering when we'd be seen. We knew. And we also knew. Have you ever gone to the booth and you're like, they tell you, oh, you don't have what you need? You're like, you got to be. And you got to leave. None of that, because they went right down the list. And you had time, if you didn't have it, to make a call. And she knew that. Why? Because the third thing was, so she was present on, she's down there where it matters, where she can most influence the fight, as we say in the military. She was over communicating and making sure her people were over communicating. And the other thing, she just had intentional discovery going on. She told me, she goes, I don't know that I fixed this or that we fixed this. There's still a lot of work to do. And she's looking around the whole time. She's like, we're still learning. And that's okay. We do hot washes or debriefs after every day. We see how we did. And she's like, we still got a lot of areas we've got to fix, but we're learning. And I thought, wow. Discovery learning, crystallized learning in real time, and leaders who give themselves and their people permission to do that as they iterate. When you combine that with leader presence on the ground and over communication in times of ambiguity, complexity, and churn, that is the quickest way to be the antithesis to just leaving people to their own devices and being casual and treating them like they're a number. Okay. So, and by the way, that atrocious Arkansas comment I just made, I'm being facetious. I love Arkansas. Getting ready to go there on vacation. But I learned a lot this week from people's behavior. I learned a lot from the good and the bad, right? And I've made a lot of mistakes myself. But one thing I do know is that rapport is essential. If you are able to build rapport, regardless of whether you have a title or not, regardless of whether you are able to direct people to do things or coerce them, that's far less effective, no matter how much of a title you have. Or, I mean, I'm talking about to some guys who have a CEO right now who just relies purely on coercion and transaction, and he's lost everybody in terms of his associate engagement. His senior leadership team is ready to mutiny on him. It doesn't work. It doesn't work in this time of churn. If the only tool in your kit bag is a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail, and that's what's friggin' got us in this shit that we're in today. Is that we've got these leaders at every level who just, the only tool in their kit bag is a hammer. And okay, that's one thing. But if you default to that in how you raise your kids, how you lead your community, how you engage as an entrepreneur or business leader, I mean, that's on you, man. Because we've never had more access to the realities of human connection to where we really know how it's working on the brain. I've just shared with you, I think, some biological realities that if you just take them into context and try them, just try the opposites of these things that we just talked about, right? Do the opposite of the PowerPoint, wrap it in stories. Do the opposite of going straight to the transactions. Make a human connection first. And instead of leaving people to form their own stories in times of complexity and change, over communicate. Tell people talk about what's going on. Just talk about what's going on. And even if you don't know, here's what I know so far. This is what I know right now. And just communicate with people and check in on them. And you'll be amazed how much they'll fight for you. You'll be amazed how much they'll clap for you when you meet that goal. I hope this was helpful. I love spending time with you. If it was, please share it with somebody that could use it. And look, we're growing this thing, aren't we, Colin? We are growing this thing. I love this whole platform. I would appreciate it if you would give us a rating. If you would subscribe, encourage other people to subscribe, and keep dialing in, keep tuning in, because we're just going to keep growing this human connection, one connection at a time. Thanks for what you do, and I'll see you on the rooftop.